This is John for Global Women's Sports Radio. Today I have the pleasure of being on the beat with New Mexico State head women's basketball coach, Brooke Atkinson. How are you, Brooke?
I'm good. How are you, John?
Thank you. I should address you as coach. I'm sorry. Uh,
Oh, you don't. You can call me Brooke. That's
uh, Let me ask you, how did you get into coaching? When did you know you wanted to be a coach?
well. Growing up, both of my parents were teachers, and then my dad and kind of my immediate family and my extended family, they were all coaches of some sort. My dad was the football and baseball coach at the high school that I went to, so I kind of grew up, from the time I could walk in some type of athletic field, and in the coaching realm. So I knew I always wanted to coach and teach. I just didn't know um, at what level until um, my last year in college. I played for Daryl Smith at Wichita State, and I had to do my student teaching. And so I already finished playing, and I had a semester of student teaching. And he, just kind of allowed me to sit in and be involved in some of that stuff. And that's when I knew I wanted to, coach at the collegiate level.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. So when you were playing college ball or even high school ball, if you knew you wanted to eventually coach, did you start taking preparations? Like, did you sit next to the coach? Did you pick the coach's brain a lot?
In high school, my coach was my dad's best friend. So, I grew up with him as well, Coach Hyatt. So, yeah. And, he would work with me a lot on my own. We'd, so I think just in the sense like he was never afraid to tell me or I was never afraid to ask. Um, and then the same thing, as a player, being in the guard position, I think you just always kind of have to be the coach on the floor.
No, last year, the last couple of years, I should say, last couple of seasons were pretty tough. I know you had to practice outside of New Mexico. I know you had to play in Texas. What does that do for the morale of the team? How did you keep things going?
Our young women were really resilient. We actually were in Tucson first semester, and then up until February 1st, we were in Phoenix at the Arizona Grand. Um, so it was definitely hard because we never got to play a home game. We never got to play in the Pan Am last year. And then our last two home series, we were able to play at a high school in El Paso. So, about 45 minutes from here. It was just, there was really no consistency. There was no, routine. We were sleeping in, I don't know, different beds, hotels. It was just a lot. So, I think if anything, it just makes you really appreciative for a routine and, being able to be in your home gym, your home bed, your home, just everything kind of your comfort.
So when you guys got to play back at home this year, the first game, it had to just be a tremendous relief, excitement.
Yeah, absolutely. And just be able to see our fans again. It'd been 2 years. I think they said it was 600 and some days the last
Wow.
time that we played in the Pan American Center. And it was awesome to be back and, to have to walk 100 yards instead of, a couple 100 miles in the sense of our home game or home site.
And how did it affect your recruiting?
Actually, it didn't really affect our recruiting at all through the dead period because of COVID. I'd say this last class we had was probably one of our better classes. I just have to give credit to my assistants. Ryan McAdams, who's no longer here, he's a head coach at Arkansas Fort Smith, which, he's a great coach and deserved the opportunity. And then my current staff, Aisha Stewart, Deaudra Brown, Earl Lewis, they did an amazing job of building relationships, and it was all done virtually. And we just had a really good recruiting class.
When you recruit, do you try to look for the best possible basketball player, or do you look for the best possible fit for your team?
You always have needs. And so I think you have specific needs, but I think for every coach that I worked under, it was like, okay, you have needs, but then it's like, who's the best player, And so I think you have to be able to see within your system and if how they can help you. But you're always wanting to get better and get, the best possible player. So I guess it's kind of, you always want to go for, you know, your your program, your system, but the better the player, it makes things easier for a coach.
And you're a couple games a few games, I should say, into the season. Could you give me a little scouting report on your team?
This team has been really fun to coach. They've really bought into the defensive end. And that's just kind of the end that we talk about that is just really our bread and butter. Because, on the defensive end, if you're just solid, if you're tough, it's going to carry over onto the offensive end, and it creates, points off of turnovers, transition points, second chance points, things like that. And so I would say I've been really happy with them defensively. I think that's really kind of set the tone in every game for us. I think we have two traditional point guards this year, so I think they do a good job of running our program. We have an inside presence that we've not always had. So I think we've just been very even. I think we have a lot of depth. And we haven't had an easy schedule, but I think we've always competed, and we've been in every game that we've played. So I think for a non-conference preseason schedule, I think it's exactly what we need.
Now, New Mexico is a beautiful area, absolutely beautiful. What would be some of your strong points when you're trying to recruit a player to your university? What would be some of the major points that you would bring out?
I mean, obviously, in New Mexico, we're not fighting with, the Phoenix Suns or the Arizona Cardinals. I mean, it's a college town. It's grown. I mean, I first started out here as an assistant in 2003, and in 19 years, it's grown tremendously. It's cost of living is obviously, it's not as low as it used to be, but it's still, we talk about our weather. In the winter, it's average of 65 degrees. But in Las Cruces and New Mexico State, you have your rival down the road with UTEP and up north with UNM. But you're the team. Everybody in Las Cruces loves the Aggies, and so you're kind of the show. You're going to get that college experience where maybe in a more of a metropolitan area, you're just going to be another face.
Now, what do you think about the NCAA expanding the tournament from 64 to 68 teams? Do you think that's going to help the mid-majors, or do you think it'll help the bigger conferences maybe get some of the more fringe teams in?
I hope it'll help the mid-majors because there's some really good mid-majors out there. I mean, we have a bunch of them in our league. So I hope, you can always hope, but I think if the men get 68, we should get 68. So I think that's only fair and just.
Yeah, I mean, being fair and just with the men's and the women's, that could open up a whole other conversation. And obviously, I'm a big supporter of women's basketball. I'm a big supporter of women's sports. So I would love to see it expand. I think obviously within limits, but the more teams, the more excitement, the more the women get to play would be fantastic, and more games for me to watch, really.
And really, if you look at the tournament this last year, I think the neutral site, like how the men have every year, I think the neutral site just made everything so much more competitive. I mean, every game was a close game. Like this was probably the most competitive, NCAA tournament that I've ever seen, and the most enjoyable.
I would agree, absolutely. Obviously, I'm a big supporter of women's sports, and a lot of times the women don't get their just due. What do you think the players or the schools can do to increase their exposure, to increase their popularity?
I think what we already are doing, obviously social media helps a ton. I don't think a lot of these discrepancies become, because there's always been advocates for women's basketball and women's sports, and they've been, pushing it. But I think because of social media and because of, WNBA players, college players, NBA players, bringing it to light, I think that's kind of helped bring awareness. But I think just we have to continue to grow our game because people are going to love and enjoy it, the way that it is. And so I just think for us, we can't look too far beyond. We just kind of have to focus on what we're doing and the brand we're doing. And I think it's only kind of selling itself. I think it helps when other people kind of bring attention to. And I think you've seen that from a lot of professional men's and women's athletes, in all realms. I think there's just, people who do have a voice or speaking up and do have a platform. And we all have a platform of some sense, and we just have to use it in the most positive way that we can.
And obviously, you're still a young coach, but you've been around for enough of a time where you saw a lot of things have changed. Like social media, when you first started coaching, probably wasn't a big deal. Do you have to talk to your players about social media? Because although it's good, as you said, it could bring exposure, but do you have to talk to them about the potential downside?
I mean, I think you always do. I'm not a big rule person in the sense, like we talk about, you know, you're a student athlete, so you're going to be a good person, you're going to be a good student, you're going to be a good teammate, don't break the law. But we just always talk about who you're representing and what you're representing. And you may only get, one first time to meet someone or kind of, give a good impression of yourself. So I think we just talk more about characteristics. My assistants do a good job of paying attention to that stuff, or if they bring it to my attention. I am not really, into social media just because of that's just too complicated for me.
You're better
But
off.
so like I think a lot of it just kind of comes throughout our program and just being smart. We have a good group, and I think they do a really good job of when we're on the road or if they're on social media, of representing themselves well. Because I just talk about, you're not only representing yourself, your family, your university, but this you get one first time to meet somebody or someone to watch you play, and that could really impact your future, yes, in a negative way, but even more in a positive way. If they have a good interaction with you, you know, you you could get a job down the line. You just don't know who they know or who they are. So we just talk about, having that platform, being an example, things like that.
Do you ever see potential coaches in your players? Do you see certain players that think, this person, and then do you do anything about it? Do you talk to them about that?
Yeah, I mean, I never want to force coaching on anybody, because it's a great, I love the profession. It's a hard profession. But usually they kind of, you know, single themselves out in the sense that, because they'll come communicate or, talk to us about things. We have a handful of kids that are coaching, and, it's an awesome area to go. If not, I understand that. But a lot of times it's kids that just really have a good understanding of the game, or maybe have been coaches' kids before. Um, and I don't know. I think we just kind of encourage anything. The one thing that we just, will not and refuse to not back on is they're going to get their degree, you know, from here. There's no choice, because that is like the one thing that we talk to them about when we recruit them and throughout, is they're going to get one degree, bare minimum. Sometimes they're going to get two.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah.
Absolutely. What would Coach Atkinson tell player Atkinson, if you could go back in time? What would you tell yourself?
Oh, I wish I knew then what I know now. I was definitely like a gym rat in the gym, you know. I think maybe just looking at the game a little bit different. I think as an athlete, you're just competitive and you want to be great, you know. I think just maybe my understanding now, so different when you are, 5 years out of college, or 10, or however many I'm out, I won't say, but
I won't say mine either. It's more than yours, I guarantee you that. So if you could give us like two or three things to look for in your team this season as this season progresses, what would you say a few of the key elements we should be watching?
I always say I always say that I'd rather be thought of as the toughest team, not the most talented. I think we are very talented, but I think in the end, down the stretch, you have to be a tougher team to be successful. Um, and I just think, I just always want our kids. We talk about, you can't really control sometimes whether the ball goes into the basket, but you can always control your effort and your energy. And if you're being a good teammate, and if you do that, things will kind of take care of themselves. And so, we just talk about just giving our best at every moment that you're in, holding nothing back. So, yeah, I think that's kind of, you know, what I think you can look forward to with our group.
And when you're not coaching, when you're not in the gym talking to players, dealing with the school stuff, what do you like to do? What do you do to unwind? What do you do to relax?
Hmm. Well, I like the Peloton. I don't know if that's
Okay.
necessarily relaxing, but obviously probably like most people through I've always been a big runner, but through, COVID, having kind of your own home gym, that's always kind of an outlet for me. I love to travel. I love to see different places, and I love watching other sports because I think it's just even basketball, because it's when you're not having like the stress or the anxiety of being the one coaching. It's good to watch and to learn. But I don't know. I like to be outside. I like to travel, do different things like that, just see different places.
Well, since you brought up travel, I'll ask you then. What are a couple of the places that you've really enjoyed going, and a couple places you really would like to go at some point?
When I was at Colorado State, we took a tour, like one of those August like tours with the team. Sweden, Denmark, Norway. That was really cool. I love New York City. I try to go there anytime I can get a vacation, just because I just think that is just such an amazing place. All the different people and food and things to do, shopping, fashion, stuff like that. And I'm going to Belize this June. I've never been, and I hear it's amazing. So
Nice. Very nice. Well, Coach, I really appreciate your time. I appreciate getting to know you, getting to learn a little bit more about your career and the team. I wish you a lot of success this season. And I thank you for your time and your consideration.
well, I really appreciate you taking the time, and between you and Henry, just obviously just taking the time to support and highlight women's sports. We really appreciate you guys.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. We're going to keep doing it, and hopefully later on the season we can check back in with you and see how the team's doing.
Sounds good. You take care.
Thank you, Coach. Have a good day.
All right, you too.
Thanks.